Good evening, everyone. This is the March 12th meeting of the 2229 Main Street Advisory Task Force. I'm the chair, Paul Bum. We have a quorum. I'm going to call the roll first here. Kurt Herman. Here. David Rope. Here. Carl Simon. Here. Pam Hill.
Here.
I'm Paul Bum. We have a quorum. We're expecting a few other people. I know that Court and Rich will not make it. First thing I want to do is go over the minutes for February 27th. There were a couple of minor corrections. Thank you, Carl. I got those on, what was it? One was a correction in the location of the today's meeting room.
And then there's just a typo.
Yes, and then there was a word change. Any other comments on February 27 minutes?
I think this is right, but, in the ownership cost section, it says, Mr. Baum had noted earlier in the discussion that attendees of the site visit learned that final decisions on site grading are not going to take place until 2026. So the task force has time to influence these efforts. And I've been a little, and it's my problem, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying, I think I have not been clear on how we and when we influence cleanup efforts, because when I first joined the task force, one of the things that was said to me was there was urgency because we could influence the cleanup, the movement of dirt, etc. It then became clear that was not exact, that wasn't accurate. And it was a fairly important kind of, it was a premise that I took seriously and thought meant that some urgency was required. But it seems as things develop, that isn't accurate, and I can see why that might not be. There's a lot of dynamics. Superfund sites change a lot as they get further into things, as I've said in the past. No surprise to me, but is that statement, do you think, true?
It is now. So the evolution of that thinking goes back to the reuse task force. Actually, we were encouraged by Bruce at the Maximus and EPA to give inputs because they had grading to do, they had options of moving soil. So the sooner we had inputs, the better to merge that. I and others have told Bruce and EPA that we haven't decided exactly what we're going to do, what we're going to recommend where. We're just in the process of doing that. So it's a little premature. At the recent site meeting, that discussion came up, and in the context of grading and soil removal at the site, and Bruce said that he really didn't need that input until about 2026, and roughly, so we have time.
Didn't need the input, or the input would not be influential, or, I mean.
Well, look, we're saying they don't need the input, they're going to grade the site appropriately, but if we have any specific requests of certain areas to grade in certain ways, they can accommodate that, but those inputs would have to come. They don't have to come right now, but we have some.
And they
time
have to be
do it.
consistent with what their designs are, so.
So there has been evolution, there was sort of an urgency, and that kind of went away.
I was wondering if that should say, so the town has time to influence the cleanup efforts, because the task force is not supposed to be around in 2026.
The town, I would say, may be able to influence these efforts. I think, I'm not. I don't think we should overstate our influence on that unless, based on just the little I've heard and the way this whole thing is evolving. I think we need to be careful on that kind of stuff.
Would you rather say can have input into the cleanup decisions? Is influence too
Right,
strong?
that's right. You could say that.
Input might be a little safer, because that's a very powerful variable, I think. At least
Yeah.
certainly influenced my thinking when I was told at the outset that we had to move because we would lose the opportunity to influence the movement of dirt. And so that's an important thing. I'm glad to know that. That's a good clarification.
Yeah, I mean, there are other reasons. Well, practically speaking, look, we're going to be done with our work, let's say by the end of the year, general idea of what we're recommending in different parts of the.
No, yeah, no,
So we can have some input there, but until there's specific, until the select board makes a decision, the town makes a decision, and there's actual planning, we're gonna do this here, we're gonna do, you know, the specific input is what EPA would really need.
No, I
And we won't be in a
totally,
position
no, I
to-
totally, what I'm trying to protect us from doing is overstating something that might make us be suggesting that the town needs to move faster rather
Yeah,
than
no,
slower, and that was a misstatement that, you know, certainly impacted me at the very beginning. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen again, and I think that we've corrected it, so that's good.
yeah, I just want to characterize it as a misstatement, it's sort of, it was an evolution of our understanding on
Well, yeah,
what
no,
the timing was.
in any event, it was
Yeah.
a powerful fact that,
Yeah.
you know, turned out not to be.
Point taken, I will change the wording to include, the town as opposed to the task force and have input on the cleaning.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
upgrade.
so it's good, because the
Thank you.
task force won't be,
Right.
this task force won't be there, another one might be.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments on the minutes? So with that change, and the other, the correction of the meeting location and is changing of to, well, there was a preposition change.
Right, so,
Did you move?
Yeah, I have those edits. So do I have a motion to,
I so
I-
moved.
a
Second.
Second.
Kurt? Yes or no?
Yes,
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, the minutes are accepted as amended, thank you for that. Next topic on the agenda is sort of debrief on the informational meeting with EPA and DOJ. That took place on February 29th in this room, and Pam and Cord and myself, Terry Ackerman, Megan Zamudo, Chris Carmody, and Mina Markarius attended. And Kara Nierenberg from EPA, Sarah Meeks, attorney from EPA, and Addie Fisk from DOJ attended. I'll characterize it as a very useful meeting. I attached the questions to the meeting packet. I don't intend to go through those questions unless you want to look at them or have some questions on the question, but they were focused largely on the federal lien. And so as far as the federal lien, we learned a couple of interesting things. First of all, the federal lien is no longer 23 million. It's probably north of 100 million now. Why is that? Because the governmental costs of the DOE and the Army costs for remediation are into that lien. I thought it was separate, that was my misunderstanding of it, but the government's cleanup costs are in that lien, so that's gonna be growing. So, yeah, your guess is as good as mine, and I think Sarah could give us a real number, but it's big. So, that whole lien forgiveness or lien, how you characterize it, is something on the table, and Pam, correct me, I summarized that there's open willingness to remove that lien, and that will come about during the settlement agreement. If the town decides to proceed, the town and EPA, and the nature of that agreement will be that in the future, if there are proceeds from the site, whether there's sale of the site or parts of the site or revenues generated, there'll be some sharing of those. The specifics of exactly what that looks like won't be known until we sit down and do the negotiations, but we understand there won't be any upfront costs. The costs will be in the future sharing of those costs. That's the general.
I think I
concept.
agree with that to a large extent. I think, I mean, what they talk about is the windfall lien problem. Is what they focused on, which makes totally good sense. If we make a killing selling it and it overtops what they spend, you know, then what the whole thing we get, you know, they want their money back.
Go
It
ahead.
makes sense. The little quibble I would have is I think that they started off without reciting, but saying with the usual caveats. This was not a categorical statement that we should feel all done with this. It subject of negotiation, and there will be a number of governmental parties that have an interest in it. So we have to be cautious in our representations.
So that's a big hurdle. We don't have that monetary hurdle. It's just a hurdle negotiating the terms of that. The second.
Well, I would say we don't. with all the appropriate caveats, we are under the view, we are of the understanding that that chunk, setting aside the windfall part of it, is likely to be forgiven. But given the usual caveats, which means that administrations can change, interests can change,
Yeah.
priorities can change, a lot can change.
Yeah, so, well, but what we understood from the meeting is that is likely, that can go away, I'll characterize it as black and white, but it's not black and white, but that's good news. Secondly, we found out before that meeting, but confirmed at the meeting, that there is no separate Mass DEP lien. There's actually, the title search showed a lien on the books, but it was confirmed by EPA, by Gary Waldeck at Mass DEP, who learned from the attorneys there that Mass DEP is being reimbursed by EPA, so the state costs are actually in that federal lien, so there's no separate cost, so you don't have to hunt that up.
Paul,
and-
excuse me.
Yes.
I know the meeting is federal officials, but are there other liens? Or is that yet to be discussed at another time?
We're gonna have a fuller discussion of that when the meeting is in the room, and we'll talk about that. There
Like
are,
the Citizens Bank lien,
Yeah, I'm ignorant about who claims, some financial.
there are a whole series of mortgages. Those have all been, they're all gone except the Citizen Bank mortgage, which is sitting still on the books, and we don't have full information on exactly what. So that's a focal point to try to kind of hunt that down. That's all that's out there. So the good news is we have the Citizens Bank lien to figure out, we have the federal lien to negotiate, and so we made a lot of headway in sort of understanding what the hurdles may be on the financial side to that. So that was the main topic of the meeting. We got into discussions about, one question was, I guess we learned from Bruce and Kara that the institutional controls, the specifics that aren't going to be known in total until the end of remediation. So I asked the question, so the town had this obligation eventually to sign a null notice of activity use limitation. But when the town sits down in the settlement agreement, we would just have to agree to sign the null. But we wouldn't be signing it until let's say the town acquired the site in 2026. There wouldn't be a null at that point because the ICs are not fully known. We would have to agree to, in the future, to sign that. With
Specifics to be determined.
most of the specifics relate to soils,
Right, to the geography of where
the geography is where they are.
But they can't be filled in until the remediation is done, so it's a willingness to.
Right, and I think there's a benefit to that because it turns out that initially there would be large areas where there'd be institutional control about soils, but it turns out it's gonna be a little bit more patchwork. And those maps won't be mapped out by DeMaximus and EPA until the end of remediation, so the actual agreement, the actual total knowledge of the ICs won't be known for a while. The null won't be physically signed until that, but we will have to agree, the town, if they move to require to commit to signing it.
And I gather, and I haven't looked at it carefully, but the consent decree implicates the responsible parties in some negotiation of the ICs as well, I think. And I don't know what that's all about, but I think they are involved. Do you know more about that?
The responsible part, so there, what's gonna happen at the site is that there's O&M, continue
Yeah, right.
operate. So the Maximus, on behalf of the responsible parties, will be on the site for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So that's the obligation of the responsible parties. And it's the obligation of the responsible parties and to specify the ICs, then those
Yeah,
ICs
that's-
become the responsibility.
Yeah, and that's,
Town.
you're right.
So,
So, but there's this.
things that'll be happening on the site, aside from development, will be, pump and treat and monitoring and inspections, and then we just have to have a system to maintain the management control.
Right, and then and the thing that struck me when I looked at the consent decree was that the ICs are yet to be negotiated in part by these parties as, so it's not just a technical decision, I gather, it's something more than that, but I know I'm speaking outside of my,
Well, no, I think there's a 30% IC plan right now, which is
Right,
basically
yeah.
written. And I think it's gonna be moving to a 90% IC plan, but it's not gonna be 100% plan, that has to be accepted by EPA.
Yeah.
Until the end of remediation, so, yeah, it's a process, but at least we know what that process is, so. When we write a report, we can articulate, more or less what that is right now, so understanding that process, I think is really important. And then, Amina asked some questions about, acquisition pathways. I think I want to go into that more during the executive session, but, that was an open discussion, but it's too much detail here. Me was trying to determine if there was what his options were, and,
I don't think we want to go into that right now.
excuse me?
I don't think we should be going into that right now.
No, but we discussed it openly with EPA and the willingness to consider certain options. So putting that aside, so I think all in all, it's a really useful informational meeting, and I really appreciate EPA and DOJ sitting down with us, coming out here to talk. Did anything more?
No, I think that was a really good meeting, and then all the lawyers, and I actually know them, they're all excellent lawyers, it's gonna be well lawyered, both by our town council, who's excellent, and, by Addie Fisk, has been around forever, and is a seasoned DOJ senior attorney. Sarah Meeks is an excellent attorney, and I think that it's really good that they're engaged.
When all that happens, at another meeting, as we get closer to sort of writing, we're gonna need to talk about timing of what's important, advise us like we're in timing, what isn't important, what is important, so the whole timing of when all this gets into negotiation planning, we'll have to talk about that. So that's the EPA meeting. Any other questions on that? Okay. I wanted to discuss the various dates as well, and what I want to do is share, and my favorite chart. The only reason I put this up there is because, these dates. Before I get to the dates, so I made, I'm always tweaking this chart, okay? You have to forgive me for that, but, and updating it. So I did start to put some dates on here because we actually know some of the dates. We know when the first public forum was. On Rue's work, Kurt and I and Chris and David had a discussion with Rue last week, and they presented their sort of initial results. We're kind of going over the results and going to give them some feedback on the results, and they need to finish up their work, and then Rich and Gary need to take those and kind of craft the whole reuse picture around with that input. So what we know right now is that we had, I'm not exactly sure when our final report's going to be in, but we had a discussion on the actually we had a discussion that they wrong. We had this discussion. They're going to be working on their report, and they will also be planning with David and Kurt and the reuse guys on when they're going to brief. When and if they're going to brief the select board, and I think that we kind of agreed that would have to be a briefing, that it's a reuse briefing that includes the risk, it's not a separate risk briefing. If it's in their contract to provide briefing, we have to accommodate that and figure out how to do that, so that's not set yet. But they're getting to the end of their work, and it's very thorough, it's looking really good, can be very relevant. And it's largely, it's good news. as far as having done it, very rigorous, so that's that line, and anything you wanna add to the root discussion?
Just briefly, that they laid out 4 scenarios, and they're all based on, if you want to reuse it, but not specifically town. The baseline is if you want to reuse it for residential and or contractor exposure. So those are really conservative, it's got to be super safe for them, so anything else kind of falls under that.
Yeah, so even if you have residential activity over here, people can still walk around the site, so there's residential exposures throughout the site, so it's very conservative. And this is relevant to the timeline, we are converging on April 16th for an executive session called legal brief findings. This is sort of an update.
I may not be in town and I might have to do it by Zoom.
Okay, that's fine, good. I think we need you there, but doing it by Zoom is fine. It's largely for Mina and the legal team to kind of brief the rest of the task force on sort of the legal issues, acquisition and risk, and for the task force to fully understand where we are and to ask questions on that. And it's the reason why that's been an executive session, but it's borders on strategy and so what Mina's directional thinkings are on opinions. So that's on the 16th. That's that specific meeting. Skipping over the workshop, the workstream integration, the public forum. I have this on this list on June 3rd. I want to talk more about that than another segment here, but that's on June 3rd. And the tentative date for the select board briefing is a week later on the 10th. That's tentative because select board can't give me a date yet because there'll be new members of the select board, there'll be a new chair. And the chair has to decide on the schedule whether they can accommodate that briefing, even if, and whether there's a meeting on the 10th. But in a general time frame, so we have outreach to do in June.
Wait, June 3rd is a Monday, right?
Yes, those are
Yeah,
both
okay,
Mondays.
gotcha.
Those are both select board meets on Monday.
Yeah,
Plan the hearings at the new one. And we'll have short meetings around that to both prepare for the main topics of those meetings in June, if you look at the schedule, which will be the so in May, at least one of those meetings, we'll have to vote completely to the public hearing, like we did before. So May 21st is an important meeting. June 4th will be the meeting right after the public hearing, but right before the select board briefing. This is magical about June 10th, the select board briefing. We can kind of push that a bit, but I'd like to, I think we'll know what we're doing in the select board, and told me several times they'd like to know what we're doing. We're gonna have at least one, if not two, new select board members, and we gotta get them up to speed on the site, and so. And we probably won't have the whole select board meeting for this topic, so this could be a challenge to do that.
Can I ask the people who are more familiar with town politics than me, whether there's any problem with briefing the public before we brief the select board?
Personal opinion, I think it'd be great to tell the select board what the feedback was. We're getting.
That's what I was thinking, that way we can inform them what the public reaction was at the forum. So they're sort of more fully briefed than if we brief them before.
In some political entities, the people in charge like to be briefed first. That's the context of the question.
Yeah,
Well, presumably Terry is keeping them somewhat informed,
right.
about this stuff,
No big deal then.
And since the select board is changing, it might be an open question in the furnace.
I mean, I think, and the select board is probably chilling up in this town for that not to matter. I just wanted to ask the question because I
That's a
really
good
don't.
question.
Yeah,
yeah, it's a really good question.
Order of operations matters.
Oh,
okay, so that's. I know some of us are chomping at the bit to write. I'm going to draft a report outline for us to all review, in April. And the reason why I think that outline is important, just, we have to think about how to write this report so the pieces are integrated. And so the outline is a way for us to collectively think about how it's going to go. And there may be sections, legal, operational risk, or we may want to integrate that. But I think the report outline would be a good way for us to start thinking about integration. It happens sort of in the early part of our integration. But we're gonna start integrating when the risk and reuse people start putting things together. We're gonna start integrating when the legal team briefs the rest of the group. And we started integrating on the ownership by exchanging the scenario. So we're doing that right now. So this whole integration flow is a bit, it looks like we don't start that until, well, April 1st, but we're actually doing that. So, and then we'll be drafting, and we'll probably have one more public forum, which I have right at the end. Right, I don't know, I put a date on that, probably right before our report is due. Or right after our report is due, I'm not sure, but right at the end, sort of what brief the public on what our recommendations are, what we're gonna be telling the select board. So I thought the chart was a good way to put this list of dates in context. I know all of you won't make all of these dates, and I had the meetings in July in Zoom. Because people tend to take vacations and, we can have hybrid meetings, but I probably won't be in town in July, so. And to Pam's point, do we need that many meetings? Let's see, I think up until June. I think I'd like to stay in that schedule.
I guess what I'm asking too is to look hard at the agendas and imagine how much time it actually takes to go through some of this stuff, which it may not take as, I think we should exercise real discipline.
I do think about the agendas and what's important to do. And I don't want to waste any time. Well, these items, they were kind of go through this pretty quickly, so we're fine. So, I don't know if you had any kind of comments on the schedule right now, but I'd like to get these on our website. Because right now our website just kind of stops with March 26th. Mark, I think David and Kurt, I think the task force needs to hear what Rue is doing. And Rue has a separate contract. They only have limited funds for attending meetings and briefings, so I don't want to step on the contract, but I think that the task force needs to hear what they're coming up with. Of course, the reuse group needs to hear that, but we all do this important piece. So whether that can happen at the March 26th meeting, or we want to push that into late April, why don't you think about that? It's good timing. But I think we'll know more when we get their revised findings. And any thoughts on?
26 might be a little early, if we're asking to make some changes.
Okay.
So I think more practically, it's probably the April 25th.
Okay. So pencil that, and we can discuss that with them.
For the two members who weren't part of the group conversation, there was a great deal of information that they've already got. So there's refinement that needs to happen, but the baseline of what they've got for these four scenarios, based on area 1 and 1A and so forth, we can go into it later, but it's not like everything's still hanging fire. A lot was resolved pending refinement. It's kind of the status. Is that a fair characterization?
I think so. I think there's some conceptual changes we're gonna ask them to adjust. But I think we're in pretty good shape overall. That's my take on it. I think getting the data in our hands and being able to work with it was a big undertaking, and I think they're largely complete with that.
Has it been an interactive thing where have you been looking at what they're doing and working with them in a kind of hands-on sort of way, or?
Not very detailed at this point, but I would like to build in some time to look at the more detailed calculations, which get pretty intense. So that's part of the request for the end of April meeting for the briefing, just in case there's a couple other things we'd like to ask.
The other thing to keep in mind is that Kara requested that Bruce sit down with the risk assessors working on the site, just to make sure that there are no surprises, that the methodology is well known, and there's convergence on that. So we need to, and I told Kara that we wouldn't really know tonight what that is, but sometime, you know, in the April, May, before they finish their report. I think it'd be wise to have that sit down, so that's something else.
I think that's a really good suggestion. I was thinking how we wanted to get EPA and Haley and Alders input. I think that's a really good idea.
And for you guys, just a quick addendum, we asked, Paul asked Rue, did you find anything that was really gonna conflict with Haley and Aldrich's original work, or is there, or any red flags? No.
Nice. Kara's raising her hand, so she did.
And,
It was, maybe it came back.
I did. I took it back down. I was just going to chime in. So yeah, we just wanted to just make sure we had a lot of discussions with them and a lot of data was transferred. We just kind of want to walk through and make sure that, you know, that they got all the data that they needed. They understood everything that they got. It was all kind of integrated in the right ways, if that makes sense. So kind of do a data competency check that everything went through properly.
yeah, Bruce was very helpful. The last few emails on the cooling pond, those were focused, because I think Rue was not so ambivalent, but really didn't know how to handle the cooling pond, because the only data they had was from the art from 2013, and there was no new data. So we were trying to figure out what the cooling pond's going to look like. It's probably not going to look like 2013, so probably using that data. So it's still, we're still having a discussion with Rue on the cooling pond. So that integration with EPA is sort of operationally important. So,
And it's relevant, again, for you two folks, because a couple of their scenarios include the possibility that either recreation or trespassing by people who are living or working on the site occurs in that water. So the risk profile for those scenarios as the cooling pond as an active potential route of exposure.
yeah, I mean, it never occurred to me that anybody could either fall into the cooling pond or, well, it's going to be very steep walls there. But unless it's totally fenced off and off limits, it could happen.
And they didn't even count fencing as completely making it off.
That's right.
Proving it.
So we want to be very conservative.
That's why the cooling pond.
Yeah, so that could happen.
Good to anticipate any
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
Someone might have.
It works to be very conservative, very cautious, very all possible exposure scenarios.
Great, that's good.
Okay, so any questions for the question of the dates?
Just one thing, Paul, I mean, there are two items that I'd like to report back to the task force on, you know, and one is that the memoir wrote on funding sources, which I'm asking for feedback, you know, from SKIO and EPA. I don't think that is actually influences our recommendation. It's more information that the select board has requested. But at some point, you know,
Well, it
I
was
can present
specifically
that.
asked for in our charge.
Right, yeah,
So, and in fact, we should review the charge and make sure that you can, there's no
so
no
anyway,
piece that we're not addressing.
I've sort of done my research and put together what I think are potential funding sources and
Yeah.
other resources. So at some point I can share that with the committee. I don't think it's urgent, but
Yeah.
just, you have that on your
I
agenda.
was not going to ignore you.
Yeah,
So,
and then I'm still working on collecting cost data from the town and also trying to get some comparable data from some developers because of the limitations the town has in their experience with some of these costs. So I don't know, that's taking me longer than I had anticipated. But I'm hoping by the end of March, I'll have all the information and then can kind of analyze it and write it up, so sometime in April. The sort of operational cost, infrastructure operational costs. Analysis, I could talk through the task force.
Yeah, I said, I think we're in pretty good shape on timing, I think we're gonna have plenty of time to write and think and revise and brief, I think, probably the biggest challenge is to figure out how to brief the public and what to say and how to brief the select board and just keep everybody involved,
And
So-
also what we're gonna decide.
well, yeah, there's a decision for what to do, and that's in there somewhere. I don't want to talk about that right now, but, we're gonna have to, so. I think I mentioned some dates where we maybe have a decision, and Rich said he's gonna be traveling and off the coast of Newfoundland, and please don't do it in July, so. We're gonna have to figure out, but so then July is time frame, we're gonna have to have some discussions. About what those recommendations look like. Is it one recommendation, is there options, is it binary, is it, so we have a lot to.
Yeah.
But the charge says, select board needs a recommendation. The form of that recommendation. It's whatever it is, it's certainly going to be contingent on the future, right? You can just list all the contingencies, because at the end of this year, there's a lot. Of uncertainty, a lot we won't know. Can we negotiate? Is the site gonna be cleaned up? Well, there's a whole list of things that are uncertainties, and we have to kind of articulate. How risky any of those uncertainties are to any decision making. So that's, I think, our coming together on just the uncertainties, just. Can we deal with the uncertainties? Are we confident that we will be manageable in terms of the recommendations? So that's gonna be some good discussions. But let us turn to the public hearing, and I did want, David, I didn't want to usurp your recommendation that they're in here, but I just wanted to put some structure on the initial discussion and what that might look like. In June, and let me just tell you what I was thinking here. A really brief introduction, not nearly as long as I took last time, just kind of set the stage. And then the main thing would be each work stream. Basically to continue, to have a seamless discussion, continue. It's like previously, before we discussed, the goals and the questions. But this time I think we want to remind the public what questions each work stream was addressing, and then what are the findings? What have we answered? That's the key piece, the key findings to date. And I think that's at the heart of the information exchange. And then, so that's the second piece. And then whether, if there are 10 people there, David, I don't think breakouts are useful. If there are 40 people there, so I think the reason why there's an alternative at the end, it's either Q&A or breakout groups. I think I'd love to have breakout groups. But that, and then you have people on Zoom, so it's tough to manage.
You do that through the course of the meeting by saying, okay, our topic and working group that we're gonna do now, and then we can have the discussion with the public and then move on to another topic. You don't have to do it in breakout groups.
Exactly, you don't have to have free-for-all Q&A. You can say.
There are people that will be there for specific
Yeah.
foci, right? But you could do that in the flow of the meeting as well as breakout groups and.
Breakout group is like. Where like legal is at one table and.
Yeah, the two people who can answer your questions on risk are over in the corner. If that's what you're here for, go sit with them and you get to ask them questions. A little bit more intimate feeling, a little bit more control feeling for the attendees, but not determinative, not important enough at this stage of this general informational kind of a meeting to matter.
I think we have to be nimble up to including the meeting, and just which way we go there.
And that
Yeah.
meeting is on the 10th of June, or
There-
we don't have, I'm sorry, but I missed, that one,
June
June
3rd, I
3rd,
just
sorry, okay.
tentative unless there's some reason not to do it, then I think we need to start planning for them.
And I guess the one thing I'm sort of struggling with is if as we've gone through the integration. And our understanding of the issues for the town are not as siloed as the work streams. And for example, that's likely to happen in relationship to the risk and the reuse. Is it best to, how do we sort of share with the public the progress we've made in integration? And so I just think that's something we have to think about, because if we have gone further than just revisiting the work of the individual work groups without necessarily sharing how we're integrating some of this.
No,
So I think in some ways, we can't really design the meeting.
but
I think until we get the May or something, we're closer to what
no,
we really want to get feedback on.
definitely. At the same time, I'd like to tell the public, this is how we came. So the risk work was done here, the reuse group did here, and then that was integrated.
Right.
Because I think sort of how the process that we actually, so the second bullet here, or third bullet is methods, how we research the answer, how we come to this point. I think that's sort of the independent piece, but the key findings are probably.
Right, there might be some more integrated findings than just individual work.
I think as we get closer to state, we're gonna have to discuss, whether, exactly your point, what makes sense, how to present the findings.
In the introduction, if I may, just for a moment. We've called this meeting to bring you up to date on what we've been doing. We've been broken down into 4 groups that have various focus areas, but we've been sharing that information among us, because, how we're gonna reuse it is relative to risk and so forth. So what you're about to hear is a conversation of what the various work areas have found. Some are findings, some are tentative. We have to really be careful about how concrete we make what I mean, there's some we
The
can.
word findings itself.
Well, we can
A little-
find some, we have found some things.
They're not opinions, they're findings.
That's right.
I wrote an expert report, we have findings.
We just need to be we need to hedge about certainty. Right? But just, in the 5-minute framing of this, we've had these 4 work groups, we've gotten together every other week and shared the information, because some of it is relevant to them, and as each work group now discusses things, that will represent what they've done, what they've found, and what they found in the context of what we've shared so far. Work group 1. I mean, is that,
I don't know, I'm just, I do think we have to report on what we've done and what we've learned. But we may have to go, what we've learned may not be only organized by work groups. So
Yep.
That's
I
all.
will say that you've got integrated findings seem to be a standalone section here.
Right.
oh, that's an interesting.
I mean, the integrated findings would be in addition to the little.
Right.
team.
I think so, just to bring it all together. Okay, what does this all mean
Right.
to the public?
And also recognizing that this will be pre-decision.
Oh, yeah, right.
We're just, we're.
We haven't made
kind of where we
recommendations
are
yet.
At this moment in time.
But that's a neat idea. Hello, here are the 4 work groups, and the 5th conversation is integration,
Right.
and that leads to public, additional
I
public
want
discussion.
to make sure at this meeting, we don't stray up the line from integrated findings to recommendations, because it could start. I think it could start sounding like that. But. So, and we're gonna talk a lot more about this, but just in general, this introductory section. Findings by, point by work stream, integrated findings, I'll add that to it, and then Q&A, it's pretty simple.
I'm not to be, too specifically oriented, but I think the word findings itself is problematic at this, I think. It's
What we've learned,
What we've learned, yeah, because findings is kind of almost it's a strangely powerful word. And why not use something a little bit more like what we've learned, and this is where we are to date. This is the information we've accumulated.
so
This is how
far,
we-
so far,
But
equivocation,
findings
equivocation.
Itself, not to, I don't want to spend more time on.
That's the tone we'll leave.
Learnings, findings,
Meeting.
I mean, there are findings, but. One challenge we're gonna have is how much do we talk about what acquisition method, one of their.
No, we
Yeah,
need
how
to
much-
talk to Mina about
Something
that.
like that, yeah, we need to, some of it's pretty straightforward, but some of it may be strategic, so that, you know.
But at least presenting to people what we've learned about the options that are available to the town and how they can
Exactly.
protect the town from risks.
What are the
I think
options?
that's very.
And
important.
the financial pieces, you know, the fact that the federal league may be forgiven, the fact that the mortgages have gone away, the fact
Right.
that there may not be a citizen's bag. I hope we have more information.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Excuse me?
A citizen's bag, it'd be nice to get some more information on that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I've been pushing,
Mm.
There must be, it has to be an old lien. I mean, how recent could the citizens bank lien be if it's related to a mortgage to one of the private parties, right?
But-
it's an active mortgage.
And on the legal stuff, you could do practically, you know, just a EPA, you know, fact sheet on how you, on liability protections for towns. I mean, I don't think that, we can't get into the weeds on this stuff, and I think there are very straightforward sort of Superfund 101 kinds of things you can say to just
Yeah, but I think-
demystify it.
So you've got the acquisition method, and the various options being explored. And then you have your house town protect itself from the liability protections. Those are very straightforward. You can go online, you can find those. I mean, the actual wording and negotiations comes later, but you know, the fact that we're gonna go down a very known path on that. On the insurance. We know we can get insurance for certain things, but certain things, we don't know if we can get insurance on the institutional controls. It's something that Chris is looking into, so we want to have as much about insurance as possible, but you know, to somebody's point that insurance doesn't cover every possibility, you know. Somebody out of the blue can sue the town for no good reason, right? No insurance policy covers you on that.
But we're not drafting this here now, we're just
Right.
doing an outline, right?
Yeah.
So we can just move along.
The financials will be interesting. I'm thinking of the cognitive processes of called framing, how you frame things. It shapes how people think. So you say, well, there's bad news and good news for the finances. The federal lien is $100 million. They'll probably forgive that, so we can probably forget that.
Yeah, I think that there's a financial, but I think there's a lot of concern.
There will be concern about what will this cost the town.
There's a lot of concern about liability to the town, of getting a Superfund site and taking out a lot of liability. And there's a difference between legacy liability and future liabilities. The legacy liabilities you cover Superfund, that's pretty easy. Future liabilities you cover with insurance. And does it cover every hole? A lot of them.
No.
Yeah, what I'm talking about it though is more direct cost. And there'll be people who want some sort of a sense of that.
I think it has to be, and I really don't think it's
Yeah.
painful to get into this, but I think it's all gonna be about. There will be abiding uncertainty, and the town has to decide whether it wants to assume the risk of taking on the site, given all the public benefits that ensue from that.
Yeah, of course,
And
the
given
liability is
the-
big.
And given the extent to which we can hedge our liability concerns, it's gonna be a decision that's a policy decision that is not gonna be clear in any real way.
No, I agree with all of that. Whenever I talk about this subject with anybody in town, one of the two questions they ask is it safe and what will it cost?
Right.
But what will it cost for what?
To acquire.
Just to acquire.
But ultimately, this body has to be considered confident.
Oh, I get all the broader things. I'm just bringing to you for the public meeting, something that people in the room are gonna wanna probably gonna wanna hear.
But I think that our thing
Yes.
should be and will be that we've learned a lot. There's not a lot of unknowns lurking out there to bite us. There could be a few, and that's an important message, you know, because we.
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, we shouldn't have. But
Before you disagree with it, let me finish vote. I mean, right?
yeah,
Because I may say something you agree with.
you do, yeah.
What was I saying?
No, so-
Yeah, I mean, we've learned a lot. You know, remember, we had no stone unturned, but. We covered a lot of ground. I mean, that's the honest to goodness key finding. We covered a lot of ground. But there's still uncertainty, you know, because the future uncertainties, right? And do we want to talk about those uncertainties in this meeting? This meeting, maybe, be transparent. What won't we know at the time we make a recommendation? what won't we? We have to decide whether we want to open that up or not. Okay, so, we're gonna have to have some, I'll rework this, the integrated discussion, I hear from David that I should probably tone this down from 10 minutes to 5 minutes with the introduction.
People generally don't come to
I'm
hear
gonna
us.
So-
Also, the half of the task force is new, so we're gonna, this is sort of a heads up, right, because we're gonna have to, it's not until June, it's now March, and we have half the people missing, so we're gonna, this is just a.
That's what, this is the first discussion, I wanted to get your feedback and to the.
Right.
One thought on just the integrated findings discussion, maybe we can organize it around potential benefits, potential risks, potential costs. Just based on this conversation, what are people interested in, concerned about, but also getting into potential benefits, which people might not be recognizing.
I think that that's essential because it's going to be in the context of an inherent abiding risk, which will never be really fully resolved, you know, and so. It's very helpful to
But-
start talking about the benefits
Yeah.
in light of the risk.
Yeah, but it's, but there might
balance.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are risks associated, there may be risks associated with not acquiring this stuff too.
Which we already suffer right now because we don't have it, right?
Another framing device for the integrated finding.
Well, no, I mean, the risk of.
Wait, let's, one
Yeah.
discussion.
No problem. I was just saying, the risk of who else acquires the site and then what impact that has on the town.
And
Isn't one we have now.
right, and that requires maybe the extent to which somebody else could acquire the site is a question. I think there's also a question about getting right of first refusal or this. I mean, there are ways to work on that kind of stuff. But anyway, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, to that end, one of the, so there were 3 reuse scenarios that the guys came up with. 2 of those were really if the town acquires. One of them is if the town doesn't acquire. And I think Gary and Rich are happy with the 2 scenarios that can fit in most uses into the town. But to your point, what are the risks of not acquiring? Yeah, what are private developers really interested in? That's a risk the town has to be, and it's probably a bunch more housing, right?
Well, and I think the other issue is the responsibility for ensuring compliance with the institutional controls will then rest with that. Right,
And then, but there's a prior question, which is likelihood of private acquisition at all, and hedges against that through rights of first refusal or other mechanisms. So I mean, there's, the question is how much is that, what's the
well,
possibility?
it's the right of first refusal and you're acquiring the site.
Yeah,
So-
you are,
so
if you're up against it, that it just leaves you like.
Well, someone's gonna acquire. I can't believe someone's, but anyway, I'm just.
But I think your point, the risk of not, how to frame the risk of not acquiring, what the consequences, the opportunities lost.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Another way of framing the integrated findings section would be to use to integrate into the thinking, the risk benefit kind of language, but to use the charge from the select board. We were asked to do this and this and this, and here's where we stand on this and this. Not decided, still be discussed, but here's the progress we've made on the specifics of the request.
I think that charge is very
Lengthy.
muddled in some ways.
Oh, okay.
You know, and very lengthy. So I think the key charge is a recommendation on should they acquire,
Or not.
under what conditions the house should acquire. I think that's the focal point. I don't think we're gonna be able to organize our presentation on all the other questions.
Not all of them.
Maybe there's a small
So,
subset.
yeah, just the broad idea of the charge, just as a framing of. So how does this all come together in what we've been asked by the select board to do? That kind of framing, and then you can talk about, we can talk about whatever we want to. But to put it in the context of how we're making progress on the specific, on the broad general question that we're asked to do. It's a possibility.
Yeah, no,
Just another idea for framing, you're gonna do this.
No, I think that's good. I just think we have to edit the chart.
Oh my gosh.
In a way that it's intelligible and helpful.
As we've discussed, yes, absolutely agree.
Yeah. The charge says, do we recommend, if the task force recommends recommendation, is it a good business decision? Good business, that's in there, I'm not
I
sure.
mean, there's a ton of
Good
questions.
business decision,
Depends on whether you want it on a miniature golf
predicts what's
course.
gonna happen in the future.
Well, it's interesting, because it should be, is it a good municipal governmental decision? We are not a business,
Yeah,
nor should we be.
Right, the charge says business decision.
that's a tough one.
But to Carl's point, exactly to Carl's point,
So
all the little things in
my
the chart.
thinking on the business decision really relates to this upfront financial piece. The cost of, I mean, the cost, even if there's no upfront cost, it still costs the town to negotiate to get to the
Yeah,
end.
well, yeah, there are gonna be legal costs, there are gonna be other grand costs, but to put the site back into use, if the town owns it and uses it for itself, it's gonna face at least $7 million cost to deal with the site infrastructure.
You think so, is that the?
Yeah, at least, I mean, I'm still collecting information and it's gonna depend a lot on the final site plan, because you know, we have this ring road, I'm not sure who ultimately would design it around the ring road, so there's a lot of issues around it, but it's gonna be at least a few $1 million to put in electric, roads, septic, water.
You're gonna give us a briefing on that, right?
What, I'm gonna give you the information I have as inexact and rough as it is, but at least it gives us a sense of magnitude.
In, the reuse guys aren't here, the reuse scenarios, so they had the reuse scenario number 3 was, if the town doesn't acquire the site as private acquisition.
Yeah, that's not gonna cost
But
them.
none of, I don't remember any of the town reuse decisions, including private parties. In other words, the parties,
There's a middle one in which the town acquires the site and leases or sells a portion of it for a assisted living facility.
so under those circumstances, aren't there, could be shared costs and.
Right, they could be shared costs and
Developing
also
the site.
the town makes improvements to the site. The land will be more valuable to the assisted living user because they won't have to pay for those improvements, so it can recap that. And there are ways you can charge the costs onto the user. It's really the third option. You know, is the town's acquiring it only for its own use. It's gonna have to pay for the roads, it's gonna have to pay for the water.
You know this better than I do. We spoke to somebody in the planning board about, you know, there's what we're doing. And she said, well, and I said, the infrastructure cost, she said, at least part of the site, the developers would put in the infrastructure.
Not for the entire site, not for the portion of the site they're not using.
No, we have to put in, water and electrical and so
Also,
but the roads,
yeah, also in terms of a major state funding source that you can get to pay for the infrastructure, it only goes for publicly owned facilities.
yeah.
We're
So,
getting ahead of ourselves.
so
Okay.
that's a factor as well.
Good.
But anyway, this is more.
We're going along and we're gonna finish in record time.
I know, I can
Yeah.
tell, you're on a
Aren't you
mission.
excited?
I'm thrilled.
You're pushing it. Last topic.
Thanks, Paul.
Last topic is a little fuzzy, and I put it on here only because I was at the NCI Concord League of Women Voters session, and I forget, Terry Akron came up after and said, boy, this puts a whole nother lens on 229 Main Street, and I said, sure does. And I said, where's the integrated plan across the town, what do we do, do we take this into account in our recommendation? It was a rhetorical question, because we're not doing integrated planning. But my question to you guys, how do we, it's a confounding factor that this whole other available parcel. And maybe all that housing goes there, maybe all the recreation goes there, maybe all the, so, I don't know.
Unless-
I've given it one bit of thought and it has to do with timing.
Timing's not that different.
Well, but it's the out in the future-ness of them both.
Oh,
That's kind of what I'm talking about.
right.
Also with MCI, as much as I've read about it, and I didn't go to the meeting or anything, but there are parcels that may be this and parcels that may be that. And the water treatment plant's probably gonna go to the town, and somebody wants to save the historic building out on Route 2, and it's factoring in with the highway. In terms of our work, as I've been thinking about it, I see the town having to make a decision about what we recommend within the next couple of years. And I see that as predating when anything concrete is gonna happen with MCI. So in terms of steps, this issue is more likely than not, as I've been thinking about, I could be completely wrong, more likely to be on their plates first.
I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah?
I mean.
The state has to figure out what the hell it's doing first.
Well, I think it's one, and this depends to a certain extent on how much we can expect that nobody will come in and take it for some reason, but I think that one could sit on this for a while. I mean, we don't, the cleanup isn't gonna be done until, I would say, probably 2028. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, you don't have to acquire this thing right now. It's sitting there. It's sat there since what, 2010, I don't know. So I think the idea that we will have to make an up or down decision as a town fairly soon is not
I-
necessarily true.
I just don't think this is an issue for the task force.
No,
It's an issue for the select board.
That's why we're having a good, yeah, I wanted to close. I agree with you. People have said, well, you guys should need to take that into account. I said, no, we're very focused on this site. It's not for us. Our successor committee or a larger plan. Take that.
And we're not doing any investigation of
No.
these other projects. We have no basis of information on which.
I
to-
think it's
This
another
is
sort
why-
of uncertainty.
Right.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
This is why I was making the point about timing.
Well, this is,
So ours comes up in the context of the broader town. But we just do ours, and that's what's gonna be on their plate, probably earlier than anything specific in MCI, and that's where we leave it. That's why, that's why I think timing is relevant to discussion.
I mean, we can note it as a consideration that the select board has to take into account in interpreting and applying our recommendations.
I mean, that's the key, so to me, it's obviously that in the report, we acknowledge certain things that are surrounding us contextually that the town really should be paying attention to, and we might even go so far as to say the town really needs to do a big comprehensive plan, and they should use our material and which should be, I would imagine, somewhat freestanding, that they could extract our stuff from that into other planning processes. And we just say, you know, that this is, we're operating in the context of other very important relevant factors, period, right?
but after the MCI meeting, I did send a letter to the select board. I basically said, somebody needs to do a larger planning.
Yeah,
I think they
Couple
all,
of select board members actually suggested I do that for prodding.
well, yeah.
Thank you.
To get it, what can I do? But I want one other, this timing issue is really important. We have to have more discussion because, okay, so we have the recommendation. So let's say a recommendation is to acquire. But we should include timing, consideration timing on that. And to your point, we think, let's say one option, we think it's really beneficial to acquire, but you don't have to, sign the papers in 2028. Or required, but because of all the planning that has to take place and DPW has needs and recreation has needs, have to start planning things much earlier. So, so you have to make decisions, or I don't have any, I'm just throwing things out there. We're gonna have to discuss how to address recommendations on timing, if in fact the recommendation is to acquire. If it's not, then we have another set of recommendations, but if it's to acquire, I think we have to do more than just say, we recommend to acquire. We have to say, do something, what happens next? We know the negotiations, we know this planning and this timing related to that, so I think. And the select board changes every 2 years, and, part of the timing is, there's a group that's very knowledgeable that at the time we make our recommendations. Needs to make a decision that carries forward. And so there's lots of timing issues that I think it's an interesting
I
discussion. for us.
think it's fascinating, and I
Yeah,
think.
because I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I agree with what I'm about to say, but one option would be to say, it's not. Now is not the time to decide this question. One could say that and give reasons for it.
For our task force.
So the task force has determined that the decision on acquisition in 2024 is premature. You could say that.
If we don't have enough if there's
if
some,
we think that
if
there's.
there's some key piece of information lacking, I would agree, but if we know what we need to know.
I'm not saying I agree with it, I'm just saying that's another.
That's fine, yeah,
it's
Yeah,
another option.
it could be an option,
Here's
there's some,
here's a question for all of us, and I don't, again, my ignorance. If the town chooses not to acquire, there's this $100 million plus lien hanging from the EPA and the federal government,
it'll be 200 million, but then.
200 by then, whatever. Let's say some factory, let's say some user X says, wow, that's awesome, I want it. They can come in and do that, yes?
Zone it residential,
Yeah,
you can do things.
well, we can zone it, right?
We could do
Town
some
could
sort of
zone.
acquisition that could make it pretty tricky to do certain.
Okay.
things.
So what I was thinking through is in my mind, if we say, hang on town, figure out what the hell you're doing with MCI and all this sort of stuff first. We're not really vulnerable to dime property, to being swooped up by, Tesla's new battery
Yeah,
factory.
yeah, I think that's a
Okay,
good,
okay.
I mean, I think that's a good, I mean, I think.
Probably not, but I,
I mean, wait, I think Mina probably has a point of view on that, but, and it probably is not satisfying, because I think it's possible that a private owner can come in, probably, private developer. But whether there are hedges against that we could employ, or whether
But they
it's
have
so
to,
unlikely that the market would not ever invite such a person or entity, that's.
Or could it be another government entity?
Yeah,
Could be another-
there's the whole Massachusetts partnership thing.
Yeah.
That I think there's just so many things that could be thought through about joint governmental action in that on that site. I mean, and the
You know,
state has.
that could come, I mean. If we make a recommendation to acquire and we say, here are some options. Investigate this, partnerships, et cetera, I think. Yeah,
But-
there
but
are
that-
other options,
But you might have options that don't involve acquisition without working on opportunities with the state. Who has an interest in the site and has some.
but I don't think we're gonna investigate all those opportunities enough to kind of. Muddle the, I don't want to muddy the water by saying we're not making a recommendation because there are 12 options sitting and we can't decide.
Well, we have to know enough about those options to know that they're marginal.
One thing on the private, statement as a taxpayer. The taxpayers through EPA are spending. I don't think the adjective was probably an impolite adjective, a blank load of. funds.
$300 million probably at the end of it.
So this site is cleaned up to residential standards for the town of Concord. They're not doing that because they think there's gonna be a factory, they're doing it because it's Concord.
Right.
And they heard Concord input from the residents, and they want this cleaned up so it can be used for enjoyment by the town. I mean, that's, to me, that's,
It's shameful from an environmental justice point of view. It really is. We should not be putting our money in Concord.
okay,
The US
it is what, I'm just saying it is what.
Oh, well.
My only question was, are we eligible if we
No, that's right. It's
propose?
not. It's like this.
It's
You let
theoretical
them
later.
decide to do it.
If we propose waiting, are we vulnerable to somebody coming and gobbling up? But we've addressed that.
Well,
For the time being, tonight,
we've done enough. tonight.
that part of the discussion in my mind
I know,
is
but
that.
I just feel there's it's incumbent upon us to view this through the lens of a big expenditure for the benefit of the town. Right, it's not expenditure for the benefit of.
and a very invaluable resource, a
Well,
large piece of land that will go. Unused for a long period of time, when there are compelling needs.
From a policy point of view, I just have to push, I would never say, I would not want to say that as a citizen of the US or this region, that this is for the benefit of the town of Concord.
No, I'm interpreting it, it's my interpretation.
Well, I think we should push back from that. There are regional opportunities. I think there should be more regionalization. This isn't, just about the town of
For the
Concord.
benefit of humanity.
Well, yeah, and you can joke about it, but I think that there are regional opportunities that have not been pursued, I think.
Okay.
People-
You get my point, there's a lot of, and I'm just responding to, could somebody swoop in and,
Yeah, that's-
and they could. But
The likelihood
would be,
is the question. What, the
And
likelihood.
what they would use it for, and would that be negative? I just want to put that question out
And,
there.
and can we do things like bury it in zoning that would protect us? But this is way beyond.
the list of needs of the town are long. And maybe they'll all be satisfied with MCI Concord, they don't need this site, but they're long. The list of the available capital funds are short, the list of needs is long. And this is why the people in FinCom said, you guys need to put together a capital budget. I said, we can't do that.
Okay, what's next?
No, what's next is, any other business.
Um,
So I think we're gonna have to, talk more about the June 3rd meeting. We gotta figure out some things with Rue and how to close on that and the various integration points.
I wanted to ask you a question. You said you were, after the room meeting, and in your notes, you said you were gonna contact Kara about the status of the planned cleanup for the cooling pond.
Yeah, I did.
And
So
they're gonna scoop up the sediment and remove the water, and so all we have to really worry about is, in the future, is surface runoff.
yes,
Okay, that was my understanding, confirmed.
yeah, I also found that in terms of there's no connectivity between the contaminated groundwater and this. And they're filling it up, they're sitting above that layer, and the plume's gonna get different.
The other one.
It's gonna get filled up with either stormwater or surface runoff from the air, so it's not gonna, not gonna contaminate the water.
From surface runoff of residentially clean
Yep.
dirt.
Clean felt.
Yeah. Whatever that is. So
say
we found-
EPA, you gotta be able to eat the dirt.
This is gonna be, I'm gonna have my picnics on this property in my backyard after they're done with this thing, geez.
No, that information was really quick and come,
Okay,
because I want to get that, so we could figure out how to deal with that area, so. Next meeting, is. It's not a test. 26th, be regular meeting, and then after.
Which I'm not gonna be there, and of course not gonna be
Right,
there.
right, and then you let me know about the exact, you will be able to attend the 16th,
I might be in
By
July,
Zoom.
I don't do it by Zoom.
Megan confirmed that meet is available. So, leading up to that, we'll have to sit down and
Yeah.
plan that out. Plan that meeting, and that'll be an executive session for benefit of the task force. Any public comments?
Is there a public?
Anybody want to? I consider Skio and EPA public for purposes here. We don't have Terry, okay. Thank you all, good meeting, and we're adjourned. 15 minutes
Thanks,
early.
Paul. Thanks, Paul.